was a fun trade. It was a little bit of a battle in terms of negotiations, and we got done a pretty massive trade. So I'm excited to break it down.
Mike, let's set the stage a little bit here. You and I are in a dynasty league that you set up a couple of years ago. It's one of my absolute favorites because the startup was an auction. Anyone who is looking to do a startup this season and you have the time to go through the auction process, it's far, far better because you give every manager a chance to go after the guys they want. So if you want a Jonathan Taylor, your question is, how much are you willing to spend, and just do it right now. The consequences of that may be that you don't have a lot left over, but you at least have choices. You can't make the argument, well, I got a draft slot that didn't allow me to go after the approach that I wanted. So do auctions if you can. This was originally an auction that made it an absolute blast. It's super flex, it's tight end premium, it's best ball. So we can focus on all the really positive, fun things. And then we don't have to be bogged down with all of those decisions in season. It has a 5-team playoff race with a 3-week total points. That eliminates a little bit of the playoff luck. That part of it's nice. You feel like if you have the best team, you're going to win. We just finished season 2. We're heading into season 3. Anthony Amico, who we've had on the show, who drafted a team with Colm and last year, he's the 2-time champion. So we're now looking for someone to take Anthony down. You finished 2nd and 3rd in the first 2 seasons. I finished 4th and 2nd. And so that kind of gives us a sense of, where we are and were, and maybe the different directions that we're going. And I say different because we had to decide who was going to go all in and who was maybe going to do a little rebuilding. So here was the trade, and we'll give the listeners a sense of which directions we decided to go. You give up Tyreek Hill, Derrick Henry, Aaron Rodgers, and Dalton Schultz. I give up Chase Claypool, Baker Mayfield, 2 round 1s, 2 round 2s, a 3, 4, and a 5 with these deeper leagues, and especially with Superflex and tight end premium, even the 3, 4, 5s. Those are not, purely throw-in types of pieces there. Then we've had some interesting things happen because immediately once the trade, these player values start to shift pretty significantly. Aaron Rodgers loses Devontae Adams. Tyreek Hill goes to Miami. Baker Mayfield, I mean, he's not good, but he's good enough that it's hard to think that in the end he's going to lose out in this QB musical chairs. But in the short term, he may have. Still a little bit unclear with how that is going to develop. So I guess the takeaway here is that I did decide to continue to push. You are rebuilding. Is this trade going to pay off for both of us? Would you call this a win-win? What are your thoughts now on this trade that we've had a little bit of time to see some player values change and just digest it a little bit?
I think it'll end up a win-win. It was a difficult trade for me to make because my team was still pretty good, but these leagues we're in, you really have to understand the market of the league that you're playing in. It's not going to reflect the overall trade market value. And the league we're in, I know no one is going to fall on the knife with some of these older players as they age out. And if I'm going to get value on some of these guys, I'm going to have to do it a year earlier than I want it to. And for me, sort of the tipping point was the Calvin Ridley suspension and me having Calvin Ridley, and that. And there's kind of an interesting segue here in terms of talking about how to build these deep dynasty best ball teams at the quarterback position. But I had gone the quantity over quality route at quarterback, which helped pay off the first couple of years. If it wasn't for freaking Amico beating me, but I'm paying the price for that now, where I was so far behind you guys at quarterback, and I no longer had the quantity because my guys lost jobs. so where I could compete with quantity before to make up for your guys' increased quality, I couldn't even do that anymore. And so I just saw a lot of risk for my team, and I decided now was a better time to get out. I felt like in terms of pure value, that you won the trade. I gave up some, got like 75 cents on the dollar, but I think when you're rebuilding, sometimes you have to, because as we saw immediately, Tyreek Hill's value shifts. It's never going to increase. Aaron Rodgers' value shifts. It's never going to increase. And I had to do a big deal with you because Like no one's paying me market value on Derrick Henry in this league. Like this league's not, it's not an FFPC league where I can ship off Derrick Henry for first rounder. Would have loved to be able to do that. So almost had to give him to you as part of a package just to make myself feel better, to feel like I got something for Derrick Henry. So that's sort of this stage of like what I was thinking as far as I made this trade. And I did make a trade with Amico to get a first rounder from him. And I shipped one of my dying crappy quarterbacks and Matt Ryan along. It was a similar deal where like Matt Ryan was the throw-in as opposed to Derrick Henry, just to make myself feel a little bit better. Like I got something after Corain drunkenly the year before got me to give up like a first and second for Matt Ryan, which is really painful right now.
Yeah, see, that probably is a bit painful. Sean has mentioned to me with some of the details of the trade that in the first 2 seasons that you went a little bit, all in to try and get that win. But, he did mention that you did it as well as you could, going all in without winning the title. But how did the win now or win immediately kind of approach pay off in those first 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, not winning once hurts. Sean has the opportunity to still win one. And his team's so balanced. I don't know. He might be in the win now window now with this trade that we made. And I should say, like, weird thing, but like the final throw and Sean had me put in was Dalton Schultz, and I feel like that at the point I was kind of like, all right, let's do it. But Schultz now he's like TE 6 or 7 in some of these redraft ADPs, and he's looking pretty good. So, but yeah, I know it went okay. I think it was fun to try. People joke like my motto is never middle. We just want to go one extreme to the other, and there's some merit to it and there's some just entertainment value to it. We're in these dynasty leagues, we want to have a little bit of fun. I think it was worth, because there were a couple of teams that just straight up tanked from the beginning, and then there were a few teams that got really stuck in the middle, and it just felt like a good opportunity. And I did kind of always in the back of my mind think, if it gets to a point where I need to tear this down, I'm going to do it a year early, not a year late. And I reached that point, and I did try to get some players like Baker Mayfield and Chase Claypool, who like I don't even think they're in my long-term plans, but these are guys that, given their pedigree, that if they have one like pretty solid season, like their value could jump a lot. And sometimes when you're rebuilding, especially in a league like we have, it's hard for me to trade for like a Jamar Chase, just cash all my chips in for Jamar Chase, because one, people are like pretty hip to the value of Jamar Chase, but two, the depth matters so much. Like I'm going to need 30 players contributing to my team at some point. So like I think it's interesting. We on the Best Ball podcast talked about Rondale Moore. Like he's one of those guys too, where like one really good year, his value flips a ton. So I only got 2 first-round picks from Sean, but if Baker Mayfield, I don't know, if he signs with Seattle and gets buoyed by Lockett and Metcalf and has a really good year, like he's probably gonna be worth a first-rounder in Superflex. If Chase Claypool with Juju Smith-Schuster gone and not an inept Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback has a really good year, he's worth a first-rounder. So I do like trying to get those types of pieces when you're rebuilding, even if you're not playing a whole long term, just to try and flip in a year.
I really liked the direction that you went here, because this idea of rebuilding a year early instead of a year late is really important. One of the things, as you and I were kind of working through this trade that is tricky, is that if you are in a league where everyone sees the positional value, or I should say the player value, and sort of the aging through, and we have some great articles from Pat when he was writing for RotoViz that just make it so clear what's going to happen to you with these trade values as the players go through. Like you said, you have to take 75 cents on the dollar, but your option otherwise is just to watch your team sink and finish 4th and then 6th and then 8th. And then, you're like, I'm the commissioner, but I kind of want to make this a team that I give up as an orphan, and so to be competitive, you have to go out there and get that. And looking at the trade from the opposite side, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, these are good values in this trade for me and where I'm going to go. But I mean, And this is kind of a weird thing because as you're trying to do win-win trades, it needs to be win-win and it needs to make sense for both people. But it's hard, I think, to do these trades because,
like, how much does it move the needle for you? Even though you're like getting like objectively like better value, that doesn't necessarily translate to like your increase in win expectation.
Exactly. And it's so difficult to not have any trade where someone is trying to rebuild end up being a lose-lose for both managers. Because I look at this and like the value has to be incredible, and then I have to get lucky in order to not lose myself. Because when these guys' trade values are going to decline. And I think that there's maybe an overestimate or sort of a misplaced belief in how much trade value and actual value doesn't align. It does more than I think people realize. And the reason that the trade values decline for these players is because they stop helping you win.
Yeah.
And people don't want them at that point. And so one of the things that obviously happens after this trade is I don't have any picks in 2022, 2023, 2024. Now, I do have a team that probably has the best starting lineup, and I have enough depth with still young players. And the tight end was helpful because I just think tight end is how you win leagues. And now I have like 5 good tight ends. And so I can weather some injuries and hopefully those guys will score some points. We'll see, how it does work out. But that element of it is tricky. And one of the things that jumped out to me that you said there is that some of those guys are not necessarily even in your long-term plan. Well, Baker Mayfield is not awesome, but if he has a lot of QB years left, and I've been a Derek Carr believer, I think that he's quite a bit better than Baker Mayfield, but you look at kind of how their careers could progress, and someone who's been a solid NFL starter and is in their 20s, I mean, that guy could have 10 years.
Yeah.
And someone who's not great. And this is kind of one of the things we talked about, because I think that when people originally look at this, and there's a possibility that Aaron Rodgers plays for a long time. If he does, then that will be great for me. That could actually be the thing that matters a lot more than Hill or Henry. But as you and I were talking about this, Mayfield could play twice as many years, maybe 3 times as many years. And then because it's best ball super flex, that element of it is gigantic. But then the thing you can do is just retrade him. And I get in these sort of rebuild types of conversations and trade negotiations with a lot of different managers and a lot of different formats. And because you have to give up something to get something, I will try and move some players that don't fit for me. And most of the time the response is, well, that doesn't fit my youth movement. And I'm just like, everybody doesn't have to. You need pieces on your roster that you could move to somebody else. Think about the next trade.
Yeah.
And so being willing to do that, I think, is a huge part of why this trade worked and why I think it's going to help both of us.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I am curious your thoughts on some of like the rebuild process. Like for me, one of the difficult parts about our league is, it's 2-horse race now, basically. But as you noted, it kind of in our show notes, there's a few teams that if they peak early could get interesting. So what's tough for me is like, how far do I go tearing this down? Like how many pieces do I trade? Do I wait till the trade deadline to hope one of these emerging teams has a really good start and now they feel like they can compete and maybe they're more willing to give up some future assets? And then there's also a couple pieces I have that I don't know. Do I hold and hope the value increases? Do I move now? Because I think it's very clear with someone like Tyreek Hill. He clearly has short-term value. He's also clearly not going to have a lot of value in 3 years from now. But then I've got some guys like Mark Andrews and DeAndre Swift, where it's like, I can hold these guys, but if it goes bad for a running back, who knows? Davis Maddox in our league, and he started with a rebuild, and we just give him so much crap because he's put a lot of capital eventually into Clyde Edwards-Helaire and just kind of refused to trade him because he always saw the upside there. And I'm wary of like, I really like DeAndre Swift, but I don't want to go down that route. DeAndre Swift, if DeAndre Swift becomes a third round value, like I'm in trouble in a couple of years. So I threw a lot at you there, Sean, but just kind of curious how you see like the process of going through a rebuild.
For the listeners, I did try and get Mike to consider including Swift in that trade, and I did not have enough that I could send back to make that part of it work.
Did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from RotoViz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.